Well, joining us in the studio now is David Davis, Conservative MP for Halton Price and Howden. And you, of course, have been calling for the Prime Minister to, in your own words, in the name of God, to go. He hasn't done that. Hearing people like that, Conservative voters, saying that they could not vote for him again, how troubling is that, do you think? Not just for you, but for your party?
Well, it is. I mean, actually, there were Cromwell's words, not mine, but never mind. No, it's what I'm picking up all over the place. The couple of weeks since I said that, we've had 1,000 emails. I went to speak to a Conservative function last week, the first one really after the COVID lockdown. I thought I'd get 50% antagonism. No, about 4 or 5% pro Boris. The rest broadly, varying degrees of enthusiasm, agreed with me. So at the time, my concern was, having seen 3 leaderships fall in the Tory party, this would take forever. They all were a death of 1,000 cuts. It was incredibly corrosive. I mean, John Major, for example, we ended up with the worst result in a century, virtually. Theresa May, the agony of the last 2 years. And I don't want to see our country or my party or actually even Boris go through that. And that was the argument. And frankly, it resonates. People now are seeing it. You're seeing the beginning of the death of 1,000 cuts. You're seeing that every issue becomes an issue not of national interest, but of political interest, whether it's Ukraine or the NIC increase in a couple of months' time. When we talk about it and debate it, it's, this is a piece of red meat, or, we should be talking in terms of what the public interest is, and this is corroding that.
The fact that the report has been delayed now so much, we've only got those 12 pages, this will be death by 1,000 cuts, because one would imagine that when the report does come out, it will be the end for him. Well, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that you see in this, and this is a recurrent thing over the years, is the political press, who basically aren't really reporting the facts. They're reporting their own opinions. Say, there's been a flood of letters. A flood of letters is 3 or 4, not 30 or 40. Because people are loath to send letters in. I mean, understandably, their loyalties, concern over the career. You sent a letter in?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. So
what I actually said to the establishment, as it were, is I will wait until 3 days after the Sue Gray report and make my decision, to give it time to sort of. It's not a sort of a panic response. We haven't really had a Sue Gray report. This is the summary.
Do you need any more conclusions? I mean, what we know is that what happened on the 13th of November reached the threshold for criminal investigation. He hasn't said he wasn't there, which to any normal person is an acknowledgement that he was. What more do you need to know?
No, the first thing is you've got, that's the sort of argument, Keir Starmer argument, very much the DPP argument, to reach this threshold. A threshold is not proof, right? That's the point to remember. My view is he should resign, full stop, not have a
for the good of the party, for his good. I mean, you heard that lady, she used words like role model and integrity over and over again.
I'm not sure, by the way, I'd pass the EQ test either, but yeah, no, she's right. She's right. I mean, basically, if he goes, as it were, under his own steam, he will walk out with his head high. He'll carry with him the victory he gave the Tory party, the completion of Brexit, the exit from the pandemic effectively with the best vaccine policy in the world. Those are quite big things for a comparatively new Prime Minister. But if he waits and we go through the agony of a confidence vote, whichever way it turns out, his whole historic reputation will be trashed. What he'll be remembered for. Think David Cameron. David Cameron did a number of good things in government, but you don't remember that now. You remember Greensill. It's the last thing that imprints, which is why I think from his own point of view, bear in mind I voted for him, like the lady, I voted for him. In fact, I would have voted for him twice if he'd stood before in a previous leadership election, and I like him, but I just don't think you can walk away from this. In as much as we've had a report from Sue Gray, what did she say? Errors, serious failures of judgment, serious failures of leadership. Who can that be? In number 10, that really lands in one place. And Theresa May yesterday, and you always have to remember, with prime ministers, there's a sort of omerta. There's a sort of, you don't really comment on your successors. So she went quite a long way in that, in terms of what she said. So it seems to me that, actually in his own interest, but no, truth be told, I don't think he will resign, but I think he should. And that's why 2 weeks ago I felt somebody should say it.
We were talking earlier with Andrew Bridgen as to could any of us imagine these parties taking place under Theresa May's watch. And it's like, it's a change of culture. There is obviously a definite change of culture. Boris Johnson said yesterday he was going to have an office for the Prime Minister. He was going to change the culture within it. But have you any experience? The culture must have changed. There must be something different. It must be more laddish or more loose or more chaotic or...
Yeah, I've served in government under a couple of prime ministers, and I've been in the House of Commons under a number of them. And I thought that one of the weakest comments yesterday was to somehow suggest that this was a long-term issue. It's not. It's not. The individual prime minister sets a certain tone, and Theresa's tone was pretty austere, frankly. I think I had one glass of wine in my entire tenure as a Brexit secretary under her, with her. So the simple truth is the culture in Number 10 is very British. It's very unlike. It's not like the West Wing. It's effectively a small building by government standards. The team are very compressed. And small, and it's one of the weaknesses and one of the strengths of the British government system. Weaknesses, you don't have a huge command structure, right? The strength is it's very personal to the Prime Minister. So for example, Thatcher made it work. I rember under Thatcher, you'd have the odd drinks party under Thatcher, not under these circumstances, but you'd have the odd drinks party. But, it was a very almost workaholic environment,
Well, you mentioned Margaret Thatcher there, and of course, famously, after she was ousted, there was this whole remorse of, what have we done? Is there a danger that all of this will, as you say, distract from his own perceived successes as a leader, and there is no obvious success? Who would you like to see in his place?
Well, I don't have a particular pick. There was no obvious successor after Margaret Thatcher. The simple truth was, and it wasn't, frankly, I'm a Thatcherite. I had remorse, personal remorse, but there wasn't much party remorse. And bear in mind, John Major went on to deliver, he didn't get a huge victory because of the way the numbers fell, but he got a huge victory in terms of the total number of votes. He got more votes than Margaret Thatcher ever got, within a year of her going. And, and he wasn't Margaret Thatcher, but nevertheless, that's what happened. Similarly with this, I think, in terms of winning elections, people oversimplify the last election. Of course, Boris had a big part of it, but the biggest weapon for the Tory party in the last election,
Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn, and the threat of tax increases. I stood on, I think, 500, 600, 700 doorsteps talking to skilled working class, lower middle class people who previously voted Labour and said they're not going to vote Labour because of tax from Jeremy Corbyn. What are we doing now? We're putting up taxes. So, we've got to get back on track, decide what sort of party we are, get some direction to it, and stop this. And the simplest way is to resolve the leadership issue.
Just lastly, I wonder if the Prime Minister has spoken to you personally since you made those comments, quoting Cromwell. No. And have you been up close while he's giving speeches, trying to persuade us? He was reportedly charming the 1922 committee last night.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure. It's very, very hard to read the 22 committee, so I'd be a bit careful about that too. They're all politicians, they're all politicians. They don't have EQ, but they have something else. I'm not sure what it is. No, I haven't talked to him. He hasn't asked to speak to me. He probably thinks I'm beyond the pale, and he will have been focusing his efforts, just practically, on people he thinks he can sway to his own side. I'm the worst possible target from that point of view. So no, that hasn't happened.
How do you, it's always amazed me about politics and how thick-skinned you have to be. You get up and you give a very sincere plea last week, for God's sake, go, and yet you say, I like him. How do you pass them in a corridor? How does that work?
Like Ian Blackford as well. They're supposed to be friends.
Yeah. I'm well known for having people like Alistair Campbell and others. Tony Benn, when he was alive, a great friend of mine. But you have to separate. In batting order, you have the national interest comes first.
Right.
then your constituency interest. I mean, putting friends and family aside. National interest comes first, then your constituent interest, then the party, then the leadership. That's the order of loyalty. And what's happening here is the first two of those are being badly damaged. The national interest, Ukraine, Afghanistan, domestic taxation, arguments with France over the channel, all of that is now being seen through a sort of a pink-coloured lens with respect to leadership. So that's first. Second, party. Well, as I said, I mean, the party will be the last people to change their mind on Boris, but they are changing their mind. The public's already done it widely, but the party are now beginning to change their mind. And that'll come home to roost at some point.
And just out of interest, obviously you've been around a while in Parliament.
Yeah.
Have you ever known a session like yesterday's?
Oh, well, not identical. There have been others where prime ministers have been on the ropes. I mean, Theresa May was one, where she didn't have a majority in the House, So not identical, but there have been lots of very, very high-stress circumstances. But yesterday, I mean, the most notable thing was the lack of overt support from the Tory benches. You forget the opposition, they're always going to call for resignations. You blow your nose, they're going to call for resignation. The Tory benches were unsettled yesterday and concerned. And I think they're now beginning to see what I meant when I talked about this death of 1,000 cuts. This is going to take months and months and months, if not years, to resolve. In all that time, we're going to be handicapped.
David Davis, fascinating to get your perspective and your insight on things from inside the House. Appreciate you coming into the studio.
Yeah, thank
Pleasure.
you. Do come back. We'd love to have you back on.
Indeed.
Thank you.
With the time at 21 minutes past 8, you're watching and listening to Breakfast here on GB News with Eamon and Isabel.